That lovely song was by Jared George, a talented, wise, and beautiful man with an equally beautiful voice. You can find him at the link that I provided in the chat. You can also find him at the Great Order. That is his own personal website. You can find that at the same link that I shared. Definitely check him out. He has a new acoustic song that just went up yesterday, and it's lovely as well. That one, however, I thought was more appropriate for what we will be talking about today. But as far as what we will be talking about today, this is the 48th official episode of Eunuch Corner Club Live. The men of American Zarathustra, Donald and Nullus, are joining me today to talk about anti-whiteism, especially with the awareness that regular folks have about anti-whiteism now because of CRT and education and in the media. So before we get going, I would like to thank all of my regular subscribers on Subscribestar. I have many good folks that, let me go ahead and max this so you guys can see it better. There we go. Heidi Van Buskirk, the Alabastard, Already Dead, Joseph Landman, Zanazak, Deus Light, Velicus, White Healing, Violence is Life, Saxmits, and West Y11 are all monthly supporters of mine on Subscribestar. We are only one subscriber away from hitting the $150 a month support goal. So if you would like to support my work, support what I do and the networking that I do for white well-being, please consider supporting me monthly. Monthly support matters a lot to me because it lets me plan. And the more that I know I can rely on each month, the less odd jobs and work that I have to find locally and the more time I can devote to what I do. That being said, for the rest of the day, you can donate to Entropy, Subscribestar, Odyssey, PayPal, and Cash App. You can even, if you don't want to spend money to post questions and comments to me in the panel, you can use the question widget on Entropy. I've shared Entropy in the chat. I highly recommend everyone use Entropy chat, especially the question widget, because when you put questions and comments to me and my guests on the question widget, the community can vote them up and down for the ones that they think are the most relevant. So please do so. Last but not least, I have been greenlit on Odyssey for their new hyper chat program. You can give me paid chats on Odyssey with dollary dues of any kind. They come directly to me with a small cut to Odyssey, of course, for their wonderful service. So that being said, we're going to move away from the shilling and get directly to the show today. We're going to bring on Nullus and Donald Kent. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. How are you two on this wonderful Friday?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, hello, and welcome to, well, hello to the audience. I always used to saying welcome because we're hosting the show.
Yeah.
Well, hey, everyone that I bring on is helping me host, hopefully, a good conversation about the well-being of our people and our children's future. So everyone is welcome to aid us in the pursuit of that.
Mm-hmm. And we should also feature Nullus's website, abnormocracy.com.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't include that
No,
in the
that's
list.
to let everybody know. AmericanZarathustra.com and abnormocracy.com. Nullus and I partner, of course, on Imperium Art and then also on his show on White Art Collective called Conversations with the Wind.
Yes.
There are so many streams and websites and groups that I need to be active with. I need to schism my mind about 10 times and have 4 different bodies to work into to connect with it all.
Right. Tell me about it. Yeah.
It's a shame that I don't have 10 me's a week to engage with all the people in our sphere.
I say the same thing often.
Because unfortunately, I still have to take care of my loved ones and my husband. So I wish I had a whole bunch of me.
No kidding. It'd be great if we could clone ourselves, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So
I just want to win the lottery, that's all.
Hey, just remember us little
big
people.
money Nullus over here. All right. Well, speaking of big money Nullus, Nullus, there's a lot of money in media. There's a lot of money in state education. There's a lot of money in hating on white folks these days. Yeah. And I believe that many, many regular parents and regular good folks of our country have started taking a notice of that because of CRT. Mm-hmm. And that is the topic of our conversation today. Would either of you two gentlemen like to start us off on the conversation? Because I know we have several things to talk about in regards to that.
If I may, yes.
Please.
So CRT, critical race theory. First of all, I'm an ex-teacher. I used to teach K-12 as an art teacher, of course. And so I have many years experience in the education system. I would say that, when you go to be a teacher, you kind of have two choices as far as jobs. You've got the best, the cream of the crop, which would be the suburban schools, maybe some even the private schools and this kind. And then you have the ghetto schools and all the schools that are sort of the bottom rung schools, where it's really not a school as much as it is a babysitting service for people that are going to end up in jail or on the street of some kind. So that's a very, very harsh way to put it. And I don't want to be too generalizing in that sense. There's a lot of good people in there that are just born into adverse circumstances. However, the administrations in those schools are largely run by, frankly, African Americans and leftists, feminists. So in the school system, you're starting off with...
There's already a host of various anti-whites and anti-male as well as anti-Christian actors in all of these places.
Huge, yeah. So I don't know. I don't think I have to candy coat it for this audience. I just kind of say fairly directly that blacks get into these positions of power and then they just hire all their friends and family. And meanwhile, whites who are highly educated and capable don't get these jobs. And so when I actually got on the committee, the hiring committee, so that I could help to bring in good people into my school, and I watched how these hiring committees were very biased to hire homosexuals and people of color and people that have like radical leftist ideas. And
one of the things, may I comment real quick on this? When I lived in a large, unfortunately, anti-white leftist city out in the Southwest, one of the things I noticed having to deal with medicine, volunteer work, helping the homeless, doing volunteer counseling, the things that I had to do, it was like the big anti-white soulless university had their dirty hands in all of that, and they put their own agents in control of all those community projects. Yeah. Did you experience that with your experience in education, them being connected to things like that?
At the time, I was not yet fully awakened to my racial consciousness. It was going through that experience that woke me up. So at the time, I could see how there were racial biases to hire people of color specifically who were unbearably, terribly undereducated and underqualified for these positions. But they would always hire a black person over a white person if they could. So I didn't, I could understand, okay, I get it. Like, you're trying to turn this into a black school per se. Not necessarily black, but non-white. Let's just put it that way, like Muslims and Hispanics, et cetera. And so I felt increasingly cornered because being sort of the straight white male in the school per se, I was gradually becoming outnumbered. And there was a certain hostility in the air. I can remember a time where one student assaulted another student, and you're a teacher, you're there, you handle it, you have to handle it. And then I, called the principal down to, intervene and take care of the situation. And as he came down and saw me, he basically laughed at me. He was a black principal, as if like I was some kind of babe in the woods, like I had no idea, like I was a deer in the headlights. And laughing at a situation where kids are assaulting each other,
that's very ugly. That's evil.
Yeah, but this is the thing that I learned, is that the ghetto culture is a culture of cruelty. It's a culture of gangsters and hustling. That is the norm in their cultural frame. It's the opposite of the whites and our cultural frame. We have standards. We're standards of excellence. We follow the rules, high trust society, all the things that we know about whites. And the two clash severely. So whites in these kind of multiracial environments are always at a disadvantage. You're always surrounded by people who are trying to hustle you 24/7. So bring in the CRT folks, the you-know-whos, and their budgets and their faux ideologies, and you feed them to these low IQ people and then pay them to go out and, shout to the sky about how evil whites are, then you've got a recipe for disaster, and as you can well see. So teachers, let's say white teachers, or even any kind of teacher that doesn't go along with it, they're in danger of losing their job. And it's because it's a very, very hostile environment in a lot of these schools these days.
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, we see the videos of it going on social media every day.
So the kind of the good side of all this that's coming out of it is that parents who are total normies and not engaged at all in politics, specifically racial politics, are now being forced out of their seats to get engaged to stop CRT in their schools. So what I've noticed and what I'm now engaged in and what I want to encourage our people to engage in is the anti-CRT movement, to become a part of that. But in a sense, what we're doing is infiltrating and turning the narrative to say CRT is anti-white. If anytime I go on any of these Facebook pages or these groups, all I have to do is type CRT is anti-white, and I'll do it again and again and again. And it's like throwing a rock at a bee's nest. You get like, you know, there's a lot of whites that, you know, will like give me like the thumbs up and the hearts and you know, they're like, yeah, this guy's got a backbone and he can stand up and say the truth. And then you have all these kind of crypto leftists, you know, who's people of color that are saying, oh no, it's not about white people and it's about America. It's about freedom. It's we don't want division and harmony, and Martin Luther King, and then all the cheesy quotes come out, all the cheesy memes of Martin Luther King, et cetera, et cetera.
Is this just regular folks parroting that, or are these fellow whites that are pushing that?
Well, you know, you kind of go as you go, and you figure out who's anti-white and who's not, you know. And I tend to block all the anti-whites that are openly anti-white, and those are usually the you-know-who's. Like they're acutely aware of me.
Well, I imagine so.
Oh man, they're like, you know, I mean, they're reporting me. They're, you know, straight out of the gate. You know,
I believe it's their ilk that destroyed my presence on Facebook. I lost every account that I ever had, pretty much.
Yeah, you know,
I just stopped using it.
Right. You know, I mean, I was just reading a comment today about, you know, I had mentioned CRT is anti-white. And then another, like a sort of a white soldier type character, military guy, came out and he's like, yeah, these people should be arrested. And I mean, he's real hardcore about it.
Nice.
And then you know who came on and said, well, you know who's really behind it all? It's actually liberal whites. And, you know, just right on the money, you know, right on cue. Come on in and make sure that it's not about you and your people who are actually funding and designing this whole thing. So anyway, I wanted to, maybe I'm hogging the mic here. I wanted to pass it off to
Nullus, you have, of course, lots of experience in, related to this topic and talking about it. Is there anything that Donald said that you personally have experienced as well that you'd like to share with us?
Well, before we go into the personal experience on it, I think that it would be worthwhile for the audience to kind of understand the genesis of critical race theory and understand where it's coming from. So this is a derivative of
I need to stop you for a second. We're getting some echo from someone. So let's
I'll turn off.
Oh, are we there?
We are good now. Go ahead, please.
All right. So this critical race theory is essentially a derivative of Max Horkheimer's critical theory. I mean, well, he wrote a manifesto about it, but the idea surrounding critical theory has been around long before Horkheimer wrote it out in his manifesto. What we're looking at here with critical race theory is a new repackaging, a rebranding of Marxism. And we have to understand it as such. The thing is that people like to say these things that there is no left-right paradigm anymore, and everybody's, you know, we should be looking at different angles of it. And while I understand the sentiment, I don't agree with that. I think that there are ideologies that are inherently anti-white, that are inherently anti-human, if you will. And Marxism is one of those ideologies.
I completely agree.
Yeah, so we have to call it out for what it is, first of all. So critical race theory is a rebranding of Marxism. And what is
Yes.
it that critical theory originally said? And again, I'm going to oversimplify this, but I would recommend that people from the audience read about this and understand the genesis of this whole idea. And what we're talking about here is basically dividing society up into various forms of oppressed and oppressor classes. And so the revolution, the Marxist revolution, is being hamstrung by our cultural institutions. And so those institutions have to be relentlessly attacked, relentlessly deconstructed, and relentlessly taken over. And
That's
so
why they want to destroy God, the family, the church, etc.
absolutely, absolutely. So everything that we hold sacred, whether that's our cultural traditions, whether that's our religious traditions, whether that's our institutions that we've painstakingly developed over the centuries, all of these are under attack. And this circles back to understanding that the arguments people have with each other about nuanced differences of religion, of what have you. And again, we can and we should always be strong in our respective convictions. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't. But what we have to do is also understand that every single institution is under attack. Every single Western institution is under attack. Every single place of a holy place that we find that we hold sacred is under attack, is being subverted, is being changed before our eyes. And the sooner we realize that, the less relevant these nuanced arguments are. Although important, again, I want to emphasize that it is important to have differences of opinion. But when you're looking at it from an external threat or an internal subversive threat that's sort of like creeped into it, so to speak, then the argument becomes a lot different. Now, as this evolves into the critical race theory aspect of it, it's interesting because there's a mystery podcast out there somewhere in the ether where Morgoth and I, we had a conversation. We had a book review on Machiavelli's The Prince.
Ooh.
And this goes back at least a year. And again, I don't have the podcast, nor do I have the rights to post it, but we did have this conversation. And in this conversation, we spoke about The Prince, and I mentioned how all of this is tied into what we're seeing today, where the first in critical theory, it was a class-based argument. Later in critical race theory, it was obviously a race-based argument, predominantly against the white populations of Europe, United States, and everywhere else. And in a sense, if you want to look at a parallel, then you would have to look at, and again, I'm using this word kind of more as a comparison, as not a real, it's not a real thing, but we are the aristocracy in a sense. So if you would translate the class argument to the race argument, then the white people of the world are that 8 to 10% of the world's population that were that 8 to 10% of the world's population when the aristocrats were, controlling Europe, or where they were the elite of Europe, or the upper classes, the Anglo-Saxon, or the WASP culture, so to speak, in the United States was the predominant elites back then. And so those were the groups attacked. And today we are those, aristocrats, meaning doesn't mean that we are, we're working class people, we're regular people. We're not anything special or anything like that. That's not really what I'm trying to say with that. But what I do mean is that they look upon us as such.
Right.
And so if we look at it that way, then the entire process becomes a lot more sinister, because then you have to take a historical view of what happened, especially in countries like Russia or in Bavaria, where they had a Bolshevik revolution, or in Hungary, where they had a Bolshevik revolution in the early 20th century, or look at China too, what they did in China, or you could go and see what Pol Pot did with their elites. So it doesn't matter where you go in that sense, because what you're looking at is, what do the Marxists do once they acquire power, and what is it that happens to the class that they're attacking, or the group that they're attacking, once they acquire power. And it's very sinister.
Yes.
And so when you start looking at it that way, and you start comparing and understanding that they're trying to look at us the way they looked at other elite classes in the past, then this is an extremely dangerous situation right now. And
Yes.
so, and then of course back then, even in the 19th and 20th century, you had a lot of aristocrats that were liberals, that were socialists. They kind of drank the Kool-Aid, and they thought that they were a part of something. They were a part of this class, and they're going to help the oppressed classes. Ultimately, they also became victims themselves. So, with a few exceptions.
Anybody who has studied what we have studied, the useful idiots and the agitators are the first to be gulagged or put against the wall.
Exactly. So what do
you think is going to happen to all of these anti-white teachers and professors when the whites actually do become openly oppressed and genocided? They're going to be the first to go because they know they were complicit in it.
Right. Well, you might have a few that make it, very few, but for the most part, they're all going to be either marginalized or shunned at best. Or in the worst case, sent to the gulag, basically,
because they understand that they were complicit in it. And when they realized that everything they had worked for was just a lie to sow the seeds of destruction and disarray, then many of them will have their hearts broken. And of course, the ones that want to take power can't be having that.
Right. And you see this now already. You see this with, for example, with feminist movements where, even among the feminists, they're trying to create this racial hierarchy where they say, well, you privileged white women should be in the back. Let the women of color be prominent. And so this whole thing
and with feminists, you also see this era of, the new alt gender crowd, the new multi-gender crowd, they are the ones trying to take over the movement. And the old guard feminists, even though I don't agree with them or like them, they are the ones that are having this done to them and being ousted from the movements they started.
Exactly. And so that's where you have to be very careful about how people don't take this seriously enough. I think that, when we're looking at CRT as a concept today, yes, you could take, you can be the devil's advocate and you can say that doesn't matter what they say about CRT as long as they're anti-CRT. And because that opens the Pandora's box for the normie to then realize that something sinister is happening. There could be a legitimate argument made for that, even with gatekeepers that try to redirect the narrative to be, it affects everybody. It doesn't just affect the whites, which is nonsensical arguments like that. But then if that's the argument, and I'm not saying that I advocate for that argument, but if that's the argument, that you want to just let people know about CRT and just let everybody, whoever represents anti-CRT, whether they're gatekeepers or not, just let them talk about it. That's fine. But if that's the case, then our job is to say, yes, listen to what that gatekeeper is saying, but there's also more to it. So let me explain to you what's more important about this, right? And how it's anti-white, and how it's a deliberate attempt at destroying everything that we hold sacred and dear. So I think, I don't like the gatekeeping, that's going on around CRT or the anti-CRT movement. I see a lot of it. I think that's kind of like that knee-jerk reaction to virtue signal that, this isn't just about the whites, it's about everybody. No, it's specifically about, it's an anti-white.
We know it's specifically anti-white because the ringleaders of it openly say that.
Exactly.
They openly say that.
Exactly.
It's not hidden. It's not a secret agenda or some 4chan meme. They openly talk about it, and books that have sold millions of copies and make the rounds through the universities, they name the white. They name us.
Absolutely. And so what I would recommend to everyone is, instead of arguing and fighting with people who are gatekeepers on this topic of anti-CRT, educate the people, educate the normies, tell them exactly how, you could say, well, they're kind of right, these guys, these anti-CRT gatekeepers, they're right about one thing, but there's more to it. And then instead of arguing with the person presenting the anti-CRT gatekeeping position, you're just essentially providing additional information for the normie. Because this way what we're doing is we're providing, we're opening up that Pandora's box even further, and
Mhm.
we're giving people an opportunity to look into it in deeper. That's not to say, of course, that we should not correct these anti-CRT gatekeepers, nor does it mean that we shouldn't be critical of them. We should be critical of them, but our
Mhm.
energy should be focused on helping the normie understand what this is really about. And that, for
Exactly.
example,
Exactly.
right. So by
Um,
saying it's a Marxist theory, by saying that it's against, that you are now considered the oppressor class. And if you look at history and you see how the Marxists treated the perceived oppressor classes once they acquired power, then you start understanding how this is about all of you. And
One thing I'd
everything.
like to say, then we're going to go over to Donald because I know he has something to say about this.
Yes.
Is when it comes to what you said, influencing. I don't use the term normie because I want normal people to think I'm normal also, so they'll talk to me. But I just say regular folks, regular folks that are just coming to this. I think the best way to reach them is not to the gatekeepers, like you call it. I don't like to pester the gatekeepers and try to browbeat them with my ideas and my language. I like to phrase things in open forum as questions. Sort of aimed at the community or aimed at the content creator vaguely. So like, let's say that I'm in a chat with Vincent James of Red Elephants, and there's like, 1,000 people in his chat group or whatever. And I'll say something like, well, wouldn't it be better if we just call them all anti-white? Or since these people are all, satanic and hate God, we should just call them anti-Christian. We should call them a name of our choosing so they can't use their tactics to wiggle away from the labels that they choose. Wouldn't that work better? And I find that when I say things and seed my lexicon through casual questions like that, so many regular folks in chat will either agree or like the comment or then starting about it. And that way, like leaven through bread, the lexicon that matters to me starts being organically talked about and circulated.
Exactly.
So, Donald, let's. I know that you have things to say on this. Let's segue back over to you here. So go ahead.
This is a beautiful flow going on here with all these things. And I'm really grateful to Nullus for him giving the bird's eye view and contextualizing it as Marxism repackaged, etc. And then also to you, Yizz, you picked right up on the whole idea of how to talk to people. So that flows right back into my point about urging our people to enter into the anti-CRT movement, but to do so very gently. These are people that are, they're new to the whole process. They are living under certain kinds of dialectic illusions, media illusions, a certain level of shame, white shame, if you will. And so they need to be guided out in a way where we demonstrate strength, pride, confidence, and knowledge about what we're talking about. But using questions rather than statements is always a really nice oblique way to get people to kind of draw them into discussion. If I say something like, say, CRT is anti-white, and then someone comes out and starts insulting me and they want to fight me, I'll say, oh, that's a good point, which is not what they expected to hear. And they might have a stupid point and they're really idiots, but I'll compliment them. Hey, wow, that's a good point. Could you expand on that? And then I'm drawing them out. I'm making them show their card. These are my reasons why I said that. And then you dissect all those reasons with data. But at the same time, say, I can understand why you would think that way. We're all sort of brought up in this leftist media culture. And unfortunately, we have to make an effort to learn more. And in the age of information, ignorance is a choice, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we have to point out is what's unseen. And that is that CRT subtext is that America is not white. Therefore, CRT is bad for diversity. Well, CRT is explicitly anti-white. So there's this notion of, for example,
I don't believe any honest reading of the books and literature from academia about CRT could say it isn't explicitly anti-white.
Well, so I just saw a post on one of the Facebook groups, and you have like a bunch of black and white and brown soldiers and they're all together helping each other out. And it's saying, America is, there's no room for racism in America. This is who we are. And what that does is it subtly says America is not white. And that reveals so much. That's the subtext of all of this. So, and
that's another lie of modernity, because if you go back to the 1700s, this country was formed specifically for white Anglo-Saxon people and Christians as well.
So POC are co-opting the narrative of white America through this movement. And it's very, I don't know if they all even know that they're doing that, but it's diabolical in a way. So once you reveal the mask, you pull the mask off, then you see people squirm. So it's basically a kind of a Republican racial phobia, is what I would call it. Whites capitulating on ownership of America and saying, oh, no, even though all my ancestors built this country and everything you benefit is from white people, no, we're the diverse, and happy land and rainbows and unicorns. So
let me pause you real quick and say something to the audience. Everyone listening today, I think this is an important thing to remember. When we talk about a place being made by white people for white people, that doesn't mean that we hate others, and it doesn't mean that others can't be a part of it. I want you to look at many places throughout the history, just in the last couple of hundred years, where even a white minority, like in South Africa, can live in a functional, wonderful state with non-white people, even if they're the majority, as long as anti-white ideology is not at the forefront. And that's what we're speaking to here today. So all of you that are listening that might be a Mexican or of African descent or even Asian descent that live here in America, as long as you are not anti-white and you support the good people of this country, you're a friend of mine. You're an ally of mine. I want everyone listening to know that that's what we're speaking to here, is the anti-white ideology and the ugly hatred that will destroy white countries. And that makes everyone's life here worse, no matter what your race is.
I want to underline what you just said. Nullus has known about this for a while. I've had this idea of trying to formulate what I would call the Western Alliance, which is basically biracial people, people of color, etc., who support a white majority, who understand that Western civilization it comes from white people. Everything that they are and enjoy, that they've grown up in, comes from people of European descent. And whatever the historic causes were for them to be born in America or other white countries, they have to acknowledge this and they have to protect it. And therefore they must protect whites. And so this is like mind-bending to most people. However, there's a lot of people of color and biracial people that are 100% on board with that. I strongly recommend people check out Hapa Perspectives YouTube channel. It's half Chinese, half white, and like super white nationalist.
Probably more so than me.
I know. He's a beast. I love him. He's a fabulous friend. But that's an exact example. So within the anti-CRT movement, I'm also hearing the voices and finally seeing some representation of people of color who acknowledge this and aren't afraid to say, I want to live in a white country. I love living in a white country. There's a really funny video about a black dude saying like, oh no, we can't have CRT. White people have the best customer service. This is like a cute, funny joke. But it shows like his heart's in the right place.
Speaking of people's hearts being in the right place, it's important to bring up that when we talk about living in service to an ideal, it doesn't mean as some kind of a second-class citizen or some kind of serfdom. It means in service to something bigger than yourself because you realize the truth about a society. And the example that I like to use is Japan, because I think Japan is really cool. I'm not really an anime person, but I like Japanese people, Japanese traditions. And of course, like every government, you can point to evil things that people did in the past, but that's not what I'm speaking to. So the example I say is if I love Japan and I wanted to move to Japan, if I go there, I would want to conform to the archetype of Eastern kind there and conform to the archetype of the Japanese people that are ethnically Japanese. Right. Because if I love them and I want to benefit from their society and dive into their society, then why on earth would I work counter to the racial group, to the host racial group or the host ethnic group of that place? It makes no sense.
It's so obvious. I was just on the XYZ festival in Australia, and I was talking about art and how art plays a role in this culture war. And I was comparing two paintings. One was a famous painting of Napoleon, and then the other one was a painting by the Black African American guy that painted Obama. It's a famous artist. And he basically copied the Napoleon painting, but it made it a black man in, like camo. And I was talking about, these people are stealing our culture from us and weaponizing it back against us rather than representing their own culture. And I said, that's exactly the analogy I used. That I lived in Japan, I studied Japanese painting. What if I made my life's mission to master their art form, to then deconstruct and demoralize Japanese people? I would be like thrown into the Pacific Ocean. Like, people would hate me for that. But in the West, people get paid for that. They get praised for that. So again, just one of a billion reasons that punctuates the fact we live in an anti-white paradigm right now, and we have to fight that.
Yeah, I wanted to address one of the comments in the comment section here, and I think it's an important point. So I think it's
May I stop you real quick? We have some paid chats I'd like to get to. Please hold that thought.
Sorry about that.
We'll cover these. We have some paid chats I want to cover. We have White Student Transmission on Cash App. He sends $15 US. Thank you so much, brother. He's one of my Twitter warriors. He helps me circulate. He actually helped me in the battle against Carolyn Borisenko and all of her anti-white allies. He says, feels like today's subject was meant for me. Love the stream. Thank you so much, brother. Glad to see you here today. Over on Trovo, I have a new follower whom I don't know, Ranul Whitewolf. Ranul Whitewolf donates 5 roses over on Trovo. And he says, how much more proof do you need that anti-whiteism is the norm than when people like Jimmy Fallon's audience will clap and cheer when white demographic decline is announced? He has another thing to say here, but to that, I don't even know if that response is genuine, because from what I know about how that type of media is formulated, audience responses are added in post, like we edit videos. So I don't know if any of that's even genuine, but it shows you that the people in charge want people to celebrate anti-whiteism. So he also says with the comment, I get along well with people here in Korea. It's just like what you were talking about with Japan. When I tell Koreans my concerns about anti-whiteism, most are supportive because they understand. So there are many people around the world that understand our plight and see the things that we're talking about. So we definitely have allies of many kinds. And I believe that is all of the community engagement. The question widget is empty, and we have no other donations. So unless the two of you have something to say to either of those, we can go ahead directly back with what Nullus was about to say. So, Nullus, if you would.
Yeah, I just wanted to address, because it's an important point, and it ties into a topic that I cover and talk about occasionally. So the Rivers and Stones made some very important comments, and I'm not. I think I said it very clearly in the beginning. I'm not saying that this is exclusively a Marxist concept. I think that that these ideas have been floating around long before Horkheimer, long before various types of Marxist iterations have been created. And I don't want to get into a political theory or philosophical debate with anyone on this. But what I do want to say to this is that, we have to understand the theories and the arguments and the discourse and using their language against them or understanding their language. All of this is very important. But there's also a point in time, and again, I'm going to look at the historical context of this, where none of this is relevant anymore. And that is the time when they have the power. That is when the Bolshevik is already in control in Russia. That's when the Bolshevik is already in control in Bavaria and Hungary, where the communist, where the CCP was in full control in China and so on. Mm-hmm. At that point, all of this discourse is irrelevant, because what happens at that stage is that they seek to then finalize the destruction. Mm-hmm. Then that's when, you can argue, as much as you want. They really don't care. They don't care about what you have to say, whether or not your arguments are better than theirs, whether or not you have a better solution, none of that matters, because at the end of the day, and I come, so many people might know this. I don't know if people in your audience know this, but my family is originally from Hungary. My mother and my father fled communist Hungary after the uprising of 1956. I grew up understanding what happened post 1944 in Hungary, when the Soviet, or in 45, when the Soviets arrived, when their people were in power. I grew up understanding from my grandparents what happened during the Bolshevik uprising, the short-lived Bolshevik revolution in 1920. And I can tell you for a fact that most people, you'll have thugs on the street, and it's going to be a very black and white, very simple approach. Do you agree or do you not agree? If you don't agree, then you're going to be beaten up, and there's no discourse anymore. And so, again, that's not to say that we shouldn't engage, and that's also not to say that we shouldn't have these debates, and that's also not to say that we shouldn't think intellectually on how we can then use their language against them. All of that's valid, and all of that's important. But when it comes down to it, and we're reaching a critical point, in my opinion, where we're getting very, very close to these elements, these Marxist derivative elements acquiring full power here. And that's very dangerous. So I'm just urging everyone to take a very serious thought about this, because there's a point where not from our point of view, by the way, I'm not advocating for violence ever. But what I'm saying is that they will be the ones who will be extremely violent with you. And that's exactly the direction we're heading. So I just urge everyone to just look at this also historically, not just philosophically or theoretically. And once you look at this historically, then you can understand why there's an urgency here. Besides, the other point is that I don't think that, and again, I'm not trying to suggest that Rivers and Stones doesn't make a good point. He does. He makes very good points. And we should engage in that. But we also have to understand the urgency of where we stand right now. And of course, we do have to find viable alternatives politically. But just to segue, if you don't mind, is this ties into this whole issue of identity over ideology, in my opinion, where we really have to understand who we are before we can formulate some form of intellectual understanding of our society. Because if we don't know who we are, we don't know where we're going, we don't know where we came from, we don't have an understanding of ourselves. And we have to really, really focus on that. And that's where, when we focus on very straightforward words like anti-white, that opens up the question of identity for those people, for the regular folk who might not have been even thinking about this, putting aside all the intellectual and philosophical arguments. A lot of people aren't even aware of their own identities. So we are at such a elementary level right now that I don't even know, how we should approach this in that sense. I think we should focus on our identity first.
I think so too. And I don't know how old the sort of disconnect of racial consciousness and tribal consciousness is in Westerners, but it does seem that there is less understanding in regular folks of some kind of identity-based unity until they're threatened. And so many of us, from Germanics to Swedes to even those of us in America, so many of us for generations have really only lived around other Europeans and understood certain societal elements to be unchanging and true, that we never really needed racial consciousness and tribal identity as a defense mechanism. And I think that's why so many millions of us are waking up to it now, is it's that environmental catalyst that is triggering our lizard brain and saying, uh-oh, there's a different kind of caveman trying to take over my cave. We got to do something about that.
Yeah. There's a lot to say. Can I jump off of Nullus's points, please?
Sure, go ahead.
So wow, I just standing ovation to everything Nullus is saying. I think Nullus is so critical to our movement because of his family history with communism. I've said countless times that we need to have more voices of people who have fled communist countries And it seems that a lot of these people don't get it. They don't get the microphone. They don't somehow have any voice. I have a friend who her dad is from Cuba, and she's really pretty out there as far as like the liberal degenerate culture. But that now that she sees that communism has taken root in the United States, she's losing her mind, and it's a massive change that she's undergoing. And she's surrounded by these lefties, and she's trying to like scream in their faces, "Stop! You don't know what this means, and how her family was murdered for this, and this kind of thing." So it's a crazy time. There's a lot of battlefields that we're engaging on. And so I wanted to comment a bit, Nullus was saying, like, how do we do this? So that was that's pretty much the theme of the show is, are people engaging in the anti-CRT movement? That's one battlefield that we can go on to start white pilling people and taking back the narrative and interjecting it into the mainstream. The mainstream news is not covering anti-CRT movement enough. There's been a little bit here and there in Tucker, Fox News, what have you, those channels. But in fact, there's daily news reports coming out about teachers quitting their jobs, university professors coming together, public meetings, sort of board meetings where the families are lambasting the administrations of their schools. This really is a war that is happening now, but again, mainstream media isn't covering every single story. So it's strike while the iron is hot. And so I'm talking to people in the audience. The three of us, we're out here, we're engaged, we're producing content that you in the audience can then go and share. And so we're, in a sense, we're creating the artillery. And then you have,
and they don't just have to share the videos and the content. They can share the ideas and the tactics that we put forward in their daily lives. That's why I love the Go Free Tactic, the lexicon and dialectic book from Jason. It allows me to engage at church, at work, with family members, with people that I hang out with. It allows me to engage and plant those necessary seeds, because remember, a word is a tool. A word is the tool of an idea. And as primates, as smart monkeys, we use tools. And the tools that we use to catch the ants, to eat the ants, the evolution of that we have now is the ideas in our head can't go into the other monkeys' heads just with, psionic power alone. We have to use our language to put those ideas out there. And we are a tribal organic people. And when you put words out there that other monkeys' minds just naturally understand, like anti-white, we should understand the power of that tool, because in fourth generational warfare, we are in the metaphorical trenches right now against our enemies. And if you're not engaging with the right kind of weapons on this battlefield, you will be lost. And that's why it's important for all of you listening to use the words we do, use the speaking points we do, and engage intelligently by picking your venue, by choosing your words carefully, because that is the victory right now in this war for Western kind. So,
if you don't mind, I'd like to just add to that by reading something. But before I do, I wanted to say that I personally believe, first of all, I believe that there are ideology, philosophy, political ideas, understanding geopolitics, all of these things are extremely important. They're relevant. Statecraft is very important. All of these things are very important. We need to understand it. I encourage everyone to read up on various ideas and thoughts. I personally believe that there are some ideologies, some thoughts that are inherently evil. That's just my personal position on it. And I think that there are some ideas and thoughts that are designed to destroy us. In other words, the European man, or the Brotherhood of European Man. All of this is something that we should take into consideration. But before we even go into the ideology and the statecraft discussion and understanding all of that, I personally believe that we need to focus on our identities. We need to understand this. And so I wanted to read just a tweet that I posted a while back, not that long ago, in terms of what our layers of reality are measured by. So I wrote, our layers of reality are measured by presence. Presence to the metaphysical discipline of the divine, presence to the tranquility and love of family, presence to foundational power of ethnos and nation, presence to the rejuvenating continuity of culture and tradition. Our jobs, hobbies, and preferences are artificial representations that cannot define reality. We exist in multiple dimensions where our layers of reality create inseparable symbiotic relationships which are manifest through our existence. Our existence is our identity. And once we understand the fact that we're here, the fact that we're thinking, the fact that we have families, the fact that we belong to the society, this brotherhood of European man, it gives us an identity. It gives us an understanding of self. Our existence is the most important element to look at, in my opinion, and understanding that. Mm-hmm.
And I think, and going back to the core of all of this, which is what we talked about earlier about the anti-white ideas, Marxism and Bolshevism and all these other things, that is why they targeted that identity to be stripped first. They understood that. They understood that when you cripple that core component out of an individual, that rots a community, it rots a family, and then generations in, that has been lost, and those people are easy to persuade and control otherwise because they don't have that natural spiritual aegis and gladius to fight that kind of tyranny. And I think that's why it's so important that nationalists and pro-Western people of all kinds understand that cultivating shared identity is so critically important for righting the wrongs and fixing what's gone bad in our society.
Right, and this also ties into, and again, I'm going to use a weird word here, but the fetishization of the individual.
I've actually used that exact phrase before, believe it or not.
So I disagree with the idea. I think that, and again, I'm not trying to create any separation between different European peoples, but it's more of an Anglo concept. The individual. It was developed in as a post-Enlightenment kind of liberal idea of man being the epitome of nature and what have you. If you look at Central European countries, many of these Central European countries are very collectivist, very strong communities, or at least they were traditionally. And in some cases they had to because of the environment that they lived in and what have you. But suffice it to say, we have it in our culture, and then I'll just hand it over to Donald. We have it in us. We have it in our culture. We have it in our traditions. And collectivist is not communist. Social is not socialist. We have to really separate these ideas and understand that a lot of these things, belong to us. Altruism, as it were, was geared toward our family and our brothers and sisters. It wasn't meant to be some kind of universal that applies to everything. We have to understand
a
these
man
things.
gives up something for himself, for his wife to have children. The family gives up something of theirs to have a strong community, and the community gives up something of theirs to have a strong national border to protect their ethnicity. Like that is a natural, healthy thing, and that is not individualism, nor is it Marxist communism, nor is it socialism. It is a natural, healthy order of things, and it makes the life and the society about the health and the well-being of the folk. And I think that's where our focus should lie. But Donald, please go ahead.
So we've established that atomization of our people is the strategy of the left to begin destroying us or have an effect on destroying us, cutting us off from our history, our identity, feeding us a fake history or fake identity, making it illegal to talk about certain events in history, etc. It's the atomization of our people. So clearly the opposite of that is what's needed. And so I want to share some good news. For a few years now, I've been trying to develop this idea of a local IRL Patriot Convention. And so I've actually networked my way all the way up to Steve Bannon a couple of years ago through that. But unfortunately, that it collapsed. There were people that weren't doing their jobs, whatever. So, but I recently got approval from a local institution to use a very nice large space that they have to do this. I've changed the name from Patriot Convention to Heritage Convention.
That's better. I like that.
Yeah, and you can obviously see that, right? I was referring to Hoppe perspective earlier. He refers to whites as heritage Americans. And I think that's a fabulous dialectic.
It is.
Whites are, and when you call whites heritage Americans, it completely, it says so much in two words. Bang! There's like kind of a.
Unlike you guys, I'm from the South, and a lot of my family fought for the South, and the sentiment that is carried up through my folk here in Appalachia is that the spirit of America still lives in us, even though the jackals that control the federal government tried to steal it all, and they're still in control of things since the 1860s.
For sure.
And I believe that heritage is alive in more than just Southerners.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm sure I'm sure that's why he chose that word heritage. It's very important.
Right. Where I live, you see people driving around with the Southern flag all the time on their cars. And for a while, I was like, oh, that's curious. What are they, like Leonard Skinner, or what's that for? And then over time, I learned more and more about the spirit of America. And I think that that's beautiful. I love my Southern brothers and sisters.
Well, we love you too, as long as you don't call us Yankees.
No comment. Okay.
yeah. Like, I'm from Hungary. No, but anyway, the point I'm trying to impress on our listeners is to start creating, however small, organizations in real life. So this particular concept, which as it goes, I'll give more information and templates on how to do it. So it's a convention on a monthly basis whereby there will be vendors. There'll be music, food, and then eventually speakers, and that it serves a purpose to create community service. It being called Heritage Convention, there'll be all of the local VFWs, all of the local history museums. Every town has its own history museum. There are these quaint little kind of houses that have, like, here's the...
there's an ancestral place, not ancestral, I'm sorry, a historic place here called Jonesboro, Tennessee, that's only like a 45-minute drive from me. And it's got a heritage center. They've got all kinds of, from the 1600s to the 1800s, all kinds of different, this happened here in history 200 years ago, and all these other things. And it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And I think that definitely reaches a lot of hearts and minds in a more holistic, engaging way than trying to make it about something more new sounding, like talking about racial consciousness or something like that. Even though you're talking about the same thing, you're activating the same thing in people. It's just putting it in a way that they're more receptive to.
Well, there it is. I'm sorry, Nullus.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly interject because Ranulf the Wolf said, could we use the word kinship instead of collectivism? And I just wanted to quickly say that nation is really the word.
Yes, nation. That's why I love the word nationalism. Yes.
Yes, because if you go back to the etymology of the word, right, it goes back to the 14th century French word of nation, right, which is a race of people, large group people with common ancestry and language, and it goes even further back to the Latin natio, which is birth, origin, breed, stock, kind, species, race of people, tribe. We are nations. So. When we speak of this, then, I personally like, and I've always said that I'm a nationalist. And the reason I'm a nationalist is because I am a part of a nation. That is my tribe, and then I have a greater nation. I have my nation, my ethnic nation, and I have my greater community, my greater community of brothers and sisters of European descent. And I'm trying to look at it that way. And we might be cousins, we might be second cousins, but we're related to each other. And even,
but we might not know anything about Finland or Sicily, but they are more in our kin circle than a Mongolian or a Sri Lankan, for example.
Yeah, and the thing is that we understand, when we understand these ties that we have to each other, both as a nation and as a greater community, then that helps us identify ourselves again, and it ties again back to the issue of identity. And in America, and again, I was born and raised here in the United States, and I live here, so I'm very, sensitive to the American experience, which is much different than the European experience. The Europeans are very focused on their particular ethnic or their nations. And there are differences between, for example, a Mediterranean and the Scandinavian, or, for example, a Frenchman and someone from Russia. There are differences, genetic differences and what have you, but there are also very strong connections. And so we have to look at these connections as bridges to bring us closer together to each other, as opposed to looking at these differences that pull us apart, because that's the goal, to pull us apart. And in the United States, when you look at it, I mean, what do we have here? We have a collection of European peoples that came here for whatever reason. And again, there's a whole theory on how and why various European groups came to the United States. But ultimately, they created the American nation. And any way you want to look at it, there is something as an American. And what, to me, at least in my mind, up until very recently, and even now, I mean, from my perspective, even now I look at it that way, that when you say an American, you automatically define that as someone of European descent, someone who is white. And so for me,
American is a white ethnicity.
Right. It's synonymous with being white. And so, okay, yes, you have an element of blacks that are part of this American tradition that goes back to almost the founding of the country, but it's not a part of the founding of the nation. And I don't know if that makes a difference. If there's a nuanced difference here, right? And
there is a nuanced difference, but it comes to identity. When it comes to who's a functional member of society, there are absolutely black folks in America that have been here as long as my family has been here, and they absolutely are part of the American ethnicity. But that doesn't mean that America isn't a white country. It just means that there are other people included too. And I talk about the natural order a lot. And when it comes to the natural order, people love other people. Europeans especially are adventurous and they like to explore. Like Europeans, especially Anglo-Saxons, love to go to other ethnicities and explore their art, their culture, and their women. And oftentimes they breed with them and bring back. So there is a natural amount of ethnic and racial inclusion in a healthy Western country. But what we have now is nowhere even close to healthy since the era of mass migration 50 or 60 years ago. So all of you out there that are listening to this, I don't want you to feel excluded. We're talking about trying to curry a healthy identity and shared unity among all the white folks to help battle this anti-whiteism. If you're out there and you happen to be mixed race or Asian or African or whatever, you are welcome to celebrate with us our white countries and be a part of it, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. I always use the analogy of the village when I talk about these things. If you have a village of 1,000 people and let's say one family moves in from some other part of the world, a non-white family moves into that town, over 3, 4, 5 generations, there's full assimilation. And then it becomes more anecdotal that, the great-grandfather or the great-grandmother was from somewhere else, right? That happens all the time. That's a historic fact. We can't deny this, right? The bigger question is, though, that when you have large amounts of the other, so to speak, coming into your village, and then eventually overtaking that village, especially at a time when your own village's demographics are in decline, then the threat of your own identity is really what is the main what's the word I'm looking for, is the main threat, right? So your group, your traditional group, the existence of your traditional group is threatened. And so you have to, when we're talking about inclusion, in that sense, I think we do have to look at it in terms of numbers. You can't allow, for example, millions upon millions of migrants to just come into Europe. I mean, that's just going to disrupt the entire continent, especially at a time when demographics are so low. Anyone
before 1950, if you told them about that, they all would have said the same thing. No, that will destroy my country. That's an invasion. Everybody around the world would have said that before this confused era of mass migration, multiculturalism.
Right. And so we have to be careful about how we define these things. And I think that, our goal should always be to promote, we shouldn't necessarily, there are always going to be outliers. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule. And I understand that. But I think that our goal should always be to promote the growth of our own people, to promote the growth and the well-being and the health of our own people, because a healthy society can then defend itself properly. It has the necessary antibodies, basically, to preserve itself, and so you need that. And again, this is not to alienate anyone who has, as you said, a mixed race background. I'm not trying to say that, but to be honest with everyone in the chat and also here, my priority always personally has always been to promote my family, to promote the strengthening of my people, and also the strengthening of my larger family, and that's my primary goal always. And so that's just for me, when I have that confidence, then I know that I can withstand any kind of change.
Indeed. We're going to pause here for just a moment to have some community engagement. Keep in mind, we've only got about 20 minutes left, so if you have questions and comments for my lovely guests today, get those in on Entropy, on Cash App, PayPal, a tip on Subscribestar, a hyper chat through Odyssey, or one of the other ways that you can tip and donate. We have Johnny Reb. Good to see you, brother. Johnny Reb says, great question or great guests and discussion today, Yizz. Appreciated. Thank you, Johnny. That was for $5 US. Mrs. Jess Horst, great ally of the channel and a friend of White Wellbeing. I know her from Jason's chat and my chat and seeing her around the way. For $10 US, Mrs. Jess Horst says, Promethean greetings, and she sends a white heart. Hail Yizz, no white guilt. Well, no white guilt, sister. Glad to see you here today. Thank you for all that you do and your great support. And over on, oh wait, no, that's one I've already read. Okay, we are done with the community engagement for now. Those of you that want to get things in, have those questions in for the panel in the next 10 to 15 minutes, because we do have to get out of here on schedule. We all have other things that we have to do today, especially those of us that might have holiday weekend plans like myself.
Wonderful, yeah. So I want to echo Nullus there for a minute and say, regardless of all the complexity that we have dealing with our current situation, we as a movement do have to place our people first and our health first as a people. So yes, I'm completely aligned with that. And it's a kind of situation where you really can't even help other people unless you're helping yourself first. So that's exactly another way to look at it. So getting back to some of the topics and the themes of the show, creating these kind of local groups, local conventions, anything in any way that you can. If they're meetup groups, Facebook groups, start doing something with the direction that we're going in as a country and the momentum with which we're heading towards disaster. It's going to be critical for us to have local networks to rely on each other. If there's so many aspects to that, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But as far as the anti-CRT movement, yes, please do engage in that. This show alone has so much content, information, ideas, dialectic, et cetera, that can arm you, to understand how to go into that field, into that battlefield, and then start helping our people. So it's a strange battle in the sense because it's a battle of the mind and the heart, right? That we're trying to resuscitate these zombies who have been, like brainwashed, atomized, taught to hate themselves, and they're surrounded by other people that constantly repeat and echo this message. So when you come out and boldly and confidently and comfortably state CRT is anti-white, and that it, and you shine a hot spotlight back on the truth of that anti-white movement and say it and keep saying it over and over, let them squirm, let them figure it out, let them work it out. Many of them will immediately say, yeah, obviously. It's like saying the sky is blue, and then there'll be others who say, this guy stood up for whites. I'm going to do that too. Hey, wow, there's this whole other movement behind the screen here. Let me move that curtain back. Holy moly, look at all these great shows and all this great content, and start to kind of leave a popcorn trail to bring into our world. So don't go in there with both guns blazing. Don't get yourself, like censored or shut down or whatever. Get in there and plant seeds. Find out who's ready to wake up and who's not. who is going to, who are the people that are explicitly anti-white and are going to do everything they can to insult you and blah, blah, blah. Some of these people are whites, and they're just so terribly brainwashed and terribly gone, that they're not, you can't help them. They're not ready. Others who are the who's or people of color that hate whites, you can just block them, and they won't even see your posts. I'm talking specifically about Facebook. I don't know. I suppose, you all have to choose your battles. You have to pick your battles, as it were. But I think if people in the audience are going to passively come to these shows and engage and enjoy the content we're creating, but not do anything, then what's going on there? We have power in numbers. We are a community movement, and we all function in I guess, as an army, in a sense, like an information army. So once again, we're providing the content. We have a massive arsenal of fantastic content, from just silly memes to like 3-hour YouTube shows, so, and what have you. And again, the arts is a big thing. You can use songs, like Olivia Key, Hyrith, Jack White, etc., and on. And if you just post a cool song about, say, My Blood by Olivia Key, where she explicitly says, what a time to be born white, and God forbid that you have pride. And the way that she says it gives you like goosebumps. It's so professionally done. It's beautifully done. And it bypasses that whole debate paradigm. It reaches right into the person's heart and squeezes. So use the tools that we're providing you to get out there and engage in this beautiful war.
I would like to just add to what Donald was saying. Maybe just picture a situation where a lone man or a woman, stands out in the crowd, and everyone around that person is trying to attack that individual. That one person just standing out and just saying no, just saying enough, doesn't mean that you have to be violent towards those persons. It means you love yourself, you love your people, you love your family enough to say, no, enough. I am not going to take this anymore.
That's where it starts.
That's where it starts. Right. And so picture yourself that person who's steadfast in their convictions, who's steadfast in their identity, who understands where they come from, and looks at what's going on and saying, no, this is not acceptable. I will not tolerate this. And I'm going to stand here until I have to stand here. Standing today is already an act of violence in the eyes of the people that want to destroy you. And so when you understand that, then you have to understand that there's a sacrifice to be made, and it's not going to be easy. And in another sense, you also have to look at this as a kind of evangelical mission, if you will, where you have to talk to people that you have to talk to your family and your friends in a way that you're motivated by love and not by hate, in a way that you can relate to them where they can relate to you. Yes, we all have family arguments, and that's just the mainstay of, it is what it is, right? So we understand that, but try to focus on approaching this from a position of love, loving yourself, loving your family, wanting more, and helping others heal and understand that what's happening right now is not something that's beneficial to them in any way. And highlight the positives, bring in the arts, bring in the culture, introduce them to the White Art Collective. It's a phenomenal community, a very positive community. But again, you don't have to do that. You can do other things, but just the point is that you always focus on it, and your motivation has to be driven by love, not by any other methodology. I just wanted to address one comment here from... Where was this here?
Well, I'd like you to put a pin in that real quick, because that beautiful sentiment is a good place for us to start winding down the end of the stream. Donald, is there anything that you wanted to say about that kind of positivity and message before we move to the final segment here of saying our goodbyes?
Absolutely. I'm chomping at the bit, actually.
I thought you were. That's why I wanted to pass it to you before moving to community engagement. So put a pin in that comment, Nullus, and we'll get right back to that. Go ahead, Don.
So Nullus just gave away our superpower right there. Imagine this, you come out, you say, no, I'm not going to comply with this anti-whiteism. I'm going to stand up for my people and myself. Immediately, they're going to throw all kinds of negativity at you. So the normal human reaction is to rah, 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 and fight back and say mean things, and then the whole thing collapses, and nothing was accomplished. But we have a force field around us where all this negativity bounces off us like bullets off Superman. So when love for your people is your core and the light that emanates out of you, not only can you resist all those negative attacks, you are impressing people who are watching this discussion intensely. They're saying, that is a leader. That is a leader. That I want to be that guy. How do I get there? And then they'll follow you. They'll listen to you. This is how we win the war.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Now, with that, we are going to move to community engagement, and then we're going to say our goodbyes, and we're going to get out of here for the wonderful holiday weekend coming up. Now, first, we're going to talk to this awesome guy who I just met over on Trovo. He sends 5 Leon limes. You'll have to forgive me. I don't understand at all how the premium currency works over on Trovo, but thank you for your donation, my friend. He says, we need to take back arts and entertainment and news. The anti-white brainwashing on TV has done so much harm. But if we take that over, we will do as you say, and and that will lead us to victory. I absolutely agree. I paraphrased that last little bit because it was really long, but thank you very much. As for your second question, he says, any thoughts on Hungary's pro-national policies, and could we perhaps implement something similar at the state and local level to reverse demographic decline? Short answer, yes. We don't have time to get into the particulars of that. We do talk about that kind of thing regularly on my streams. So if you stick around, we will be talking about that. I personally promote localism and local engagement to keep out the anti-white policies that do seek to destroy us. I talk about that all the time, especially on my morning walks. So for sake of time, thank you, Renewal White Wolf. We're going to step over that to something else today. Joshua Ham over on D-Live here. Let's see. I lost it in chat. There's something I wanted to say to him. He says, where does one ask these questions? Since I'm looking at running for office locally, I want to try to learn the ways of the dialectics. The link that I sent you in chat is called Go Free. That is the manual by Jason Kuna, which talks about the use of the dialectics. I know how to contact you privately. I will give you links to people's channels and specific videos that are good breakdowns of the 5 major terms and the example talking points for engaging with people comfortably on a local level. And of course, I talk about that stuff regularly on my channel. Just pay attention to me and the words that I use, pay attention to the other content creators, the words they use, start picking it up, and definitely get that book, Go Free. Study the meme curatives to the meme pathogens in that book, and then it'll come out of you naturally, just like water falling off a duck. You'll be able to dispel the anti-white lies and inspire others to do the same around you. It works every time. 60% of the time, it works every time. So, all right. Over on Entropy, we don't have anything new over on Entropy. Those are messages that I should have cleared earlier. We don't have any hyper chats on Odyssey. I'm going to refresh PayPal and Subscribestar to make sure I don't miss any regular supporters over there. And it doesn't look like we have any tips on Subscribestar, so we're closing that down. And nothing new on PayPal, so we're closing that down. And one last check on Cash App here. And nothing new on Cash App. So that leaves us in the clear to go ahead and start closing the stream. So with this wonderful positive stream about how to engage with others, the nature of loving your own kind, loving your heritage, and keeping things Promethean, keeping things pristine. Like Donald said a moment ago, we are not going to be defeated by being called anti-white slurs like Nazi and racist and bigot. Those things we are immune to those things because we use the intelligent aegis and gladius of positivity, love for our own people, and the supporting of others around the world doing the same. We will be immune to those ugly attacks, and you will let the people around you know it. Let them hear it. Let them hear the truth. Let them see it in you. And with that being said, you two gentlemen have been wonderful guests. Would you like to talk about upcoming projects you might have, things you'd like me to link and shill for everyone listening?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly say that my poetry and literature podcast, Conversations with the Wind, will have the season 3 will commence.
Oh, before you do that, we had a quick $1 donation on just popped up on Cash App here. Thank you, Robert. Robert in the chat, he sends $1 US and says, "Thank you from Azimuth Clark." Azimuth Clark, and I think you guys know him from chat. But anyway, thank you, Azimuth Clark. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Nullus.
So season 3 of Conversations with the Wind will commence late October, early November, and I encourage everyone to visit the White Art Collective for Conversations with the Wind, but also for a number of other excellent programs. On Saturday night, we have the Saturday night live stream. Then we have Mama's Monday Mix on Monday nights. We have various programs now that are starting. There's going to be a bunch of new projects that'll be posted on the White Art Collective's website. We also have the Spooky Shorts competition, so I encourage everyone to take a look at that. Make your own spooky short film, if you will. And you can find me on, well, my website is abnormocracy.com. That's abnormal democracy, abnormocracy.com. And then I'm on Linktree at abnormocracy. So I have all my various links there. I'm also on Gab at Nullus. And then my YouTube channel is also Nullus Abnormocracy. I have poems that I've read from others, poems that I've written and read of my own my own poems, and then I've also had collaborations with various artists, including Donald, on my YouTube channel that I posted. So it's with music and imagery and everything. I also have archived episodes of Conversations with the Wind on my YouTube channel, season 1 and season 2. And that's about it, I guess, unless I'm missing something.
I shared those links, the White Art Collective, your website, Abnormocracy. I shared those in the chat. You can also find out how to contact and follow Nullus, as well as his channel and his work, in the description below. Donald, why don't you talk about things coming? I know that you just had something that you did this morning, and you have another engagement coming up.
Yeah, at 6:30 this morning, I was on the XYZ Festival, which is an Australian far-right web magazine. It's a website, xyz.net. And they have, later today, they're having Mark Collette on. It's really wonderful to be able to cross our world over into their world. We need more representation of people outside of, North America. And so that went beautifully well. That was a 2-hour show. I did a huge presentation on the arts in the culture war, and then after that, it was all Q&A. So that's linked in my Twitter. Really, really great show. Jeff Winston actually complimented me on it, so I'm very pleased that I was able to represent the White Art Collective in that show. So a lot of interesting things coming up. On Monday, I'm doing a show with Daniel Concannon, who was on Fox News with recently. A lot of us know about him. He was just on No White Guilt, the after party. He's he's a teacher who quit his job due to critical race theory, and kind of a big figure right now in the news. So he's going to be.
I'm not going to spoil anything because I haven't heard back yet, but I'm trying to get him on for a corner club conversation.
Wonderful. So what I'm trying to do is create a new niche in our white positive media sphere, where we have teachers who meet up and talk about the experience of working in education. So it'll be Daniel Concannon, Brant Danger of God, it just slipped my mind. I'm dying right now. I forgot the name of his website. School of the West. I'm sorry, schoolofthewest.world. And this is a white positive online curriculum. So I keep promoting that as the alternative to critical race theory. If there's anti-white curriculum, why not pro-white or positive white curriculum? So the three of us are getting together. We're going to jam on ideas about being teachers, we're going to focus on the anti-critical race theory movement, which we were talking about today. So we're going to go for a deeper dive into that. That's Monday. Should be about 6 or 7 in the evening.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so we'll meet periodically whenever there's something in the news to come back. And then I'm probably going to seek out other educators in our sphere to.
That sounds great.
Start a new niche, a new show on American.
Speaking of meeting, the last thing that we're going to shill today before we say our goodbyes and get out of here, you talked about having a heritage convention. I'm having an American Patriot meetup this fall.
Nice.
I'm inviting people to come with me. I'm reserving several campsites. I'm providing food and drinks. I'm inviting white positive and America positive patriots and friends of mine to come see the leaves change in the beautiful Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. Wow. That's going to be the second weekend of October. If you would like to be involved in that, if you would like to financially fund that, it's going to cost about $300 all said and done. If you'd like to be involved, if you want to come yourself, get in touch with me privately. If you're in the server, which is the private server I won't name, those of you out there, you will know what I'm talking about. Message me on that. If you would like to be involved in that and aren't in the server, give me an email or a PM on one of my many social media accounts. And yes, Gab has PMs finally, so you can private message on Gab finally. Let me know if you'd like to be a part of that or support that in any way. I would like to start having annual white positive meetups, America First meetups, that kind of thing, just to get people of our various spheres used to meeting up in person and just having fun, grilling hot dogs and going to the shooting range and just enjoying nature together. Because I think celebrating life and community should be around the core of what we do. And I want to put my money where my mouth is and make that happen at least once a year. So we're going to start that this October with an Appalachian meetup. So if you're interested in that and want to get involved, let me know.
Wonderful.
With that being said, we have come to the end of this stream. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I'm going to give each of you a moment. Say what you would like. Say your parting words and sentiments to the great audience with us today before we get out of here. Nullus, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you, Yizz, and I wanted to thank the audience and this wonderful conversation that we had with Donald. And I'm honored to be here with you. And I hope that I provided some interesting positions and opinions on these topics.
Oh, you certainly did, or I wouldn't have had you here.
And I just want to very simply tell everybody, we will win.
We will win. I always like to end my streams and my videos, not my streams, but my videos by saying, keep heart and speak the truth to all who have ears to hear it. Because righteousness, nature, science, truth, it's all on our side. We are undeniably the champions of this story, and we should all act like it.
Absolutely.
Donald?
Boy, I'm supposed to follow that? My gosh, what am I? It's an honor to be in your presence, both of you. Thank you for all the work that you do. As I always say, there's a responsibility on the shoulder of the audience. Please go out and spread the word. Help us continue the momentum that we've developed. These are crazy times. Have love in your heart. Surround yourself with the divine and go forward and change the world. We will win.
Absolutely. And with that being said, we're going to wrap up the stream. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday weekend. This coming Monday night, I know that it's going to conflict with what Donald talked about, but as usual on Monday nights, we have Discordant Dragons. No high-profile guests for this week, but we're having some fan favorites on. But a week after next week, we're having Don the Pleb and Semiagog on for the 2 Mondays from now for Discordant Dragons. You'll definitely not want to miss that one. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Keep heart, speak the truth to all who have ears to hear it, and love your people. And that being said, we're out.